Let's just jump right in. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to unpack the absolutely wild, incredibly complex, and honestly, endlessly fascinating layers of a true music icon. Look, we all know the music, right? The dancing, the sheer global fame. But behind that famous sequined glove and those record-breaking albums, there was a man whose life was literally filled with hidden secrets, massive ambitions, and everyday realities that most of us completely missed. So today, we're taking a journey through the totally unknown sides of the king of pop himself, Michael Jackson.
To kick things off, I've got a quick trivia question for you. Who almost played Marvel's Spider-Man? Now, if your brain instantly goes to Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, or Tom Holland, you've actually got to rewind the clock a bit further back. We're talking the 1990s here. And the answer to this comic book trivia question? It isn't a traditional Hollywood actor at all.
Yep, no way, right? It was Michael Jackson. The guy had a massive, massive Marvel dream. See, back in the 1990s, Marvel Comics was actually going through some pretty intense financial struggles, and Michael Jackson saw this as the absolute perfect opportunity, not just because he was a savvy businessman, but because he had one very specific, desperate goal in mind. He wanted to produce a Spider-Man movie and cast himself in the lead role as Peter Parker. Literally, he tried to buy the entire Marvel universe, the whole shebang, just so he could be the one swinging from the webs. Which brings us to Section 1, Unexpected Hollywood Super Ambitions. So clearly, Michael Jackson wasn't just satisfied with conquering the music charts. His vision extended way, way beyond the recording studio. He wanted to own literal superhero franchises. But what's really crazy about this story is the reaction from Marvel's own legendary creator. Stan Lee was actually on board with it. Lee publicly went on record saying he thought Jackson taking over and playing Spider-Man could have been a genuinely good idea. It just really shows you how close this bizarre, alternate reality version of superhero cinematic history almost came to actually happening. I mean, if that deal had gone through, the entire landscape of modern blockbuster movies would probably look completely different today. Moving right along to Section 2, Inside His Fantasy World. Having that intense level of global fame drove Jackson to seek extreme privacy. But rather than just, buying a quiet house out in the suburbs, he decided to build an isolated, literal fantasy world out in California. We're talking about Neverland Ranch. And guys, this wasn't just a big backyard, it was a self-contained kingdom. He built a massive, fully operational amusement park. He had his own private zoo just filled with exotic animals. He even had a working train station constructed right there on the property. He basically created a place where the outside world couldn't reach him, a permanent childhood utopia where he made up all the rules. And as you might guess, inside that utopia lived some very unique residents. Meet Bubbles the chimp. Bubbles wasn't just an animal kept out in a cage, he was treated like a literal member of the family. The details here are just fascinating. Bubbles the chimpanzee would actually sit and drink tea with Michael. He was trained to use a normal human toilet, and get this, he even slept in a crib right inside Jackson's own bedroom. It's just a perfect illustration of how deeply Jackson wanted to surround himself with innocence and wonder, totally removed from normal societal conventions. All right, let's get into Section 3, Addressing the Public Image. So, as you can imagine, living in a secluded fantasy world with amusement rides and a chimp sleeping in your bedroom, it inevitably leads to some intense public scrutiny. It makes it absolutely crucial for us to separate fact from fiction here. For years, the public and the tabloids relentlessly spread this massive rumor that Jackson was intentionally and deliberately bleaching his skin to change his race. But the medical reality was entirely different. Jackson actually suffered from vitiligo. It's a condition that destroys the skin's pigment cells, and it causes severe blotching. So the changes to his appearance, that was the result of an unavoidable medical condition, not some cosmetic choice. But the rumors just grew so incredibly loud that he couldn't stay quiet inside his fantasy world anymore. It ultimately took a historic, deeply personal, and universally watched live television interview with Oprah Winfrey for him to finally reveal the truth about his health struggles to the entire world. It was a massive, massive moment of vulnerability for him, showing the painful reality that was hiding behind the public caricature. But, and this is what brilliantly illustrates his complex relationship with the media, he didn't actually hate all the rumors. In fact, sometimes he actively created them. Take the infamous story that he slept in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber so he could live to be 150 years old. People literally believed this for decades. The truth? It was a total prank. Jackson intentionally had a photo taken of himself inside the chamber, and then he secretly leaked it to the press himself just to see if they would print it, and they absolutely did.
Now let's look at Section 4, the $1 million purchases.
So that playful, eccentric mindset, it extended directly into his wallet. Jackson amassed a truly massive fortune, and he used it to acquire some of the most unique and priceless artifacts on the planet. Just let this number sink in for a second here. $1,500,000. Think about what you could buy with that kind of money, right? A mansion? A whole fleet of luxury cars? Now, what single, bizarre item do you think Michael Jackson spent this staggering amount on at an auction?
He spent it on a trophy, more specifically, the 1939 Best Picture Academy Award trophy for the film Gone with the Wind. He loved movies in Hollywood history so much that he dropped $1.5 million just to own that single historic statuette. It really puts his spending habits into a whole new perspective, doesn't it?
But of course, all of this extravagance came at a severe price. The financial reality of running Neverland Ranch was staggering. The initial purchase of the property alone was $17 million. But the real killer, that was the maintenance. It cost him $10 million every single year just in annual upkeep to keep those rides running, the zoo fed, and the grounds pristine. That's a lot of money. And those mind-boggling costs eventually caught up with him, heavily contributing to the severe financial troubles he faced later on in his life. The fantasy world simply became way too expensive to sustain. And finally, Section 5, an unmatched pop legacy. Because look, beyond the rumors, the wild spending, and the eccentricities, Jackson left behind an incredible legacy of real-world impact and sheer undeniable physical ingenuity. Let's just look at one perfect example of that. We've all seen the music video for Smooth Criminal, right? The one where he does that impossible, gravity-defying forward lean. For years, people assumed it was camera trickery or invisible wires. But what's genuinely amazing is that it was real-world engineering. Jackson actually co-invented and officially patented a specialized anti-gravity shoe mechanism. The heel of the shoe would lock right into a peg on the floor, allowing him to lean forward past his center of gravity. So he wasn't just a dancer, he was an actual inventor pushing the boundaries of physical performance. And his impact reached absolutely every corner of the globe in ways you probably wouldn't expect. We call him the King of Pop as a nickname, sure, but he was actually literal royalty. During a trip to the Ivory Coast of Africa, he was officially crowned as the King of Saint-Louis by a local village. He was embraced not just as a musician, but as a genuine royal figure. Which brings us to a final question I want to leave you with today. After exploring all these hidden facets, the superhero ambitions, the fantasy ranch, the self-leaked pranks, the tragic medical realities, and the patented genius, how are you going to remember the King of Pop? Do you weigh him by his controversies, his bizarre eccentricities, or his monumental, undeniable artistic legacy? It is a giant puzzle of a human being, and understanding these hidden sides makes his story all the more fascinating. Thanks for hanging out with me on this explainer today, and remember, keep questioning the history you think you know.